was written 100 years ago, and it talks about the nation of North Korea rising up in 2200, and it's going to take over the whole known world. What would you think? You don't think so, okay? You think that's crazy. But then some of us, our great-great-grandchildren are alive then, and guess what? North Korea rules the world. What would they think when they look back at that manuscript? What would they think? How did they know? All right? Yeah, wow. You know, how did someone call into existence that which doesn't exist yet, especially North Korea? Well, that's exactly what's going to happen here again in the book of Daniel in chapter 8, where Daniel is going to see another vision, and it's going to be prophetic about the coming nations that will rise before the time of Christ. Now, last week we saw Daniel 7, the vision of the four beasts, and it was very similar to the vision of Nebuchadnezzar had, the dream. You know, had a gold chest of silver, belly of thighs of brass, and then legs of iron, all right? And that was the Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian Empire, which was overtaken by the Medo-Persian Empire, which was taken over by the Greeks, all right? Okay, and then finally the Romans. Well, in this one, we're going to see a vision about the Medo-Persian and Grecian empires themselves in chapter 8. So that's what we're going to look at. Now, following similar formats, he's going to have the vision, and we'll go through it. And then Gabriel. Does anyone know who Gabriel is? I'm sorry?
Maybe the angel Gabriel.
He's an angel. What kind of angel? An archangel. So there's a hierarchy of angels. An archangel's like a chief angel. And so he's the one that's going to reveal to Daniel what this vision's all about. Now, when you look at it, let's just read a couple things, then we'll go back. We'll look in chapter 8 and verse 1. In the third year of the reign of Belshazzar, this is 2 years after the first vision he had in chapter 7, a vision appeared to me, Daniel, subsequent to the one who appeared to me previously. So here he has it. Now go all the way to the end of the chapter in verse 27. Then I, Daniel, was exhausted and sick for days. Then I got up again and carried out the king's business, but I was astounded at the vision, and there was none to explain it. Now, without having read what's in between, what do you already know about it? It's intense, isn't it? So if it makes you sick for days and he's just exhausted, this is like your worst dream and worst nightmare. I don't know, last night, this is recording, I dreamed that Heather fell off the roof at our house, and then I dreamed my best friend got in a car accident and I had to pull him out. I woke up and I was awake for an hour. You know, do you ever have those kind of dreams? Like, what's that all about? And well, hopefully nothing, because we don't believe in those things, but you never know. It was nothing like this, though, okay? So that's what Daniel's going to go through. And so we're going to go through the dream, and we're going to also offer the explanation as we go through it, and just because it's easier that way, all right? So when we look at it, it's about 547 BC. Does anyone remember when they went into captivity in Babylon? 607, I'll give you that, 605. All right, how long are they going to be in there according to Jeremiah? 70 years. So when do they get out? 535. So they're getting closer there, right? Okay. And so here we see this vision of the ram of goats. So I lifted my eyes and looked, and behold, a ram which had two horns. And so we're not talking about just any kind of goat, but one, you know, it's a male with big horns standing in front of the canal. The two of the horns were long, but one was longer than the other. Now, we know, since you guys are very experienced at interpreting dreams and visions, what do horns usually stand for? Kings, all right? Kings and kingdoms, okay? I'm sorry? Okay, all right. So I saw the ram budding westward, northward, southward. No other beast could stand before him, nor there was anyone to rescue him from his power, but he did as he pleased and magnified himself. Now, with Out to knowing what this one's about, what would you guess, since you're all experts in interpreting dreams, right? A conquering kingdom, and he goes every direction he wishes, and no one can stand before him, so it's most likely going to be a world empire, okay? And so that's exactly what we're going to see. Strauss says the ram was the national emblem of Persia, a ram being stamped on Persian coins, as well as the headdress of Persian emperors. Now, is that coincidence that Daniel sees a dream and there's a ram? Well, of course not. And so the principal theater of the war, says Comet, was against the Scythians northward, the Greeks westward, against the Egyptians southward. Which way did this ram go? Those directions. And so everyone understands this is the Persian Empire. Now, who is the first one in the Medo-Persian Empire to take charge? Darius the Mede, right? Then the Persians came over and they overtook them. But they're known as the Medo-Persian Empire. Now, observing, behold, a male goat was coming from the west over the surface of the whole earth without touching the ground. And the goat had a conspicuous horn between his eyes. He came up, and the ram that had the two horns, which I'd seen standing in the front of the canal, and rushed at him in his mighty wrath. So here's a picture. Wouldn't this be quite a dream? Now, this horn was a long one. Newton, Clark says, 200 years before the time of Daniel, they're called the goat people. All right, that's interesting. So here we have, he says, I saw him in verse 7, coming beside the ram, and he was enraged at him, and he struck the ram and shattered his two horns, and the ram had no strength to withstand him. So he hurled him to the ground and trampled him, and there was none to rescue the ram from his power. Then the male goat magnified himself exceedingly, but as soon as he was mighty, the large horn was broken, and in its place there came up four conspicuous horns towards the four winds of the heaven. All right, so, we'll just go on. This mighty small horn arises in. Out of them came a fourth, a small horn, that which grew exceedingly great towards the south, toward the east, and toward the beautiful land. Does anyone have a guess what the beautiful land might be? Palestine, the land of Israel. Okay. So he goes down there, and he gave up to the hosts of heaven and caused some of the hosts and some of the stars to fall to the earth. Now again, you being interpreters, when stars fall to the earth, what is that? Kings or rulers or leaders falling because another kingdom is conquering them, all right? And it trampled them down. Now, the glorious land is found in many places in references to the New Testament, and it's always used in reference to the land of Israel. So we're correct there, all right? Maccabees, this is not a biblical book, an inspired one, describes how an individual called Antiochus Epiphanes came down and persecuted the Jews. Well, we'll explain how he got there, all right? Some say he had killed 100,000 Jews, all right? So this small horn, I heard a holy one speaking, another holy one said that particular one who was speaking, how will the vision about the regular sacrifice apply? Now, we're going to talk about that. While the transgression causes horror, so it's allowed both the holy place, what would that be? If we're talking about the land of Israel? The temple. Now we're talking about the temple and the host to be trampled. Then he said 2,300 evenings. And then the holy place will be properly restored. Now, here's a picture of this guy named Antiochus Epiphanes. He actually desecrated the temple when he overtook it, and he slaughtered a pig inside the temple, all right? Now, for a Jew, pigs were unclean animals to start with, and to have a foreigner invade your city and to desecrate the temple with pig's blood is the worst kind of insult, all right? And so that's what we see him doing. This guy was not a very nice fellow at all, and we'll talk about him a little more. Just by the way, this 2,300 days, you're going to get so many fanciful theories we're not even going to talk about, but here's a chart about how it speaks about the events in 1844 when Christ actually came, all right? Well, it didn't happen, and yet out of that came the Seventh-day Adventists and other groups like Jehovah's Witness. And you're going to get all sorts of weird renderings of what this might mean, okay? But it's really not hard. So Daniel had seen the vision. Now I'm in verse 15. I sought to understand it. Behold, standing before me was one who looked like a man. I heard the voice of a man between the books of Eli and the banks, that's the river. And he called out and said, Gabriel, give this man an understanding of the vision. Who's talking to him? He's talking to who? Gabriel, the angel. Who's talking to Gabriel? Well, it just says a man, looked like a man with a voice of man. Now, does it identify it as God? Probably is, or it could even be Jesus for all we know, okay? So he came near to me where I was standing, and when he came, I was frightened and fell on my face. But he said to me, Son of man, I understand the vision pertains to the time of the end. Again, I just want you to know, here is God the Father, here is Jesus who sits on the throne, and here are angels. Obviously, angels are very much less inferior to God the Father, right? And Jesus, correct? Because they're subordinate. In fact, angels are ministering servants for you and me, for people that are Christians that are going to inherit eternal life. And so that's their role. But what strikes me all the time, anytime a human is in the presence of an angel, what do they always do? Now, is this a choreographed thing? Oh, there's an angel. Let's get down. Is that what they're doing just because that's what you do? Yeah, this is just a natural response because he says he was frightened. You're in front of such an awesome being that you cannot stand on your feet anymore. And you're going to fall on your face. Now, when's the last time, honestly, anyone fell on their face in front of anything or anybody? You haven't, have you? And why is that? There's only really one reason I can think of. We've never been in front of something this special to cause us to fall on our face, right? Now, this is just an angel. It's Gabriel, the archangel. But what is it going to be like to stand before God? And for Jesus himself? Can't even imagine. Now, again, we wonder sometimes if we're all alone here. There are literally millions of angels, and they're all sent back and forth to the earth from heaven to serve God and us on our behalf. We read that again in Hebrews chapter 1, verse 13. So, in the big picture, do you and I have anything to worry about? Do we? No. Just think about what it must be like. So he said, Son of man, you're going to understand this vision. So while he was talking with me, I sank into a deep sleep with my face to the ground. That's funny. He's on the ground because he's frightened, and that's where he sleeps. But he touched me and made me stand upright. We see a lot of that, men being touched by angelic and spiritual beings, right? When John was before Jesus, he fell before him as a dead man, and what did Jesus do? He touched him, all right? And so it shows care, right, and concern, okay? So I said, I'm going to let you know what will occur at the final period of the indignation, for it pertains to appointed time, the end. So now we're going to get to the interpretation where we're going to make sense of it. Verse 20. Now, again, look in your Bible. Just read it for yourself on your apps, whatever. And he says, very specifically, I didn't just fill this in. The ram which you saw with the two horns represents the kings of the Media and Persia. One ram, two horns. The Medes and the Persian Empire, okay? They're in control right now. Well, that's not hard to prophesy that because it's happening currently to Daniel. But look at verse 21. That shaggy goat that overpowers and breaks or kills this ram with two horns, he said it's the kingdom of Greece. And the large horn that is between his eyes is its first king. This long, big horn is his first king. Now again, who just been kicking around the kingdom of Greece up until this time? The Medo-Persians, right? I mean, they're an existing country, but they're not of any significance. But that's going to change. The Greeks are going to overpower the world. He's going to come flying with his feet not on the ground. He's going to take this guy on, and that'll be the end of it. And it's going to be truly a blitzkrieg. Who is the first king of the kingdom of Greece? Alexander the Great. Now, all right, good. I'll mention him. Since you wanted me to talk about it, here's Alexander the Great. He says, the shaggy goat represents the kingdom of Greece. The large horn between his eyes is the first king. The broken horn of the four hands that rose in place represents four kingdoms, which will arise from his nation. Now, here is what the chart I want you to see it. He was born in 356. His father was King Philip of Macedonia. That's who you're talking about, right? All right. And his mother was Olympias, and she was supposed to be some beautiful woman. They really didn't get along very well in their marriage. In fact, it was a very dysfunctional family, and they argued and fought all the time. Okay? Philip was assassinated in 336, and so Alexander takes the throne as a young man. Now, he was a king, but really not a prominent one as far as a world empire. We're talking about when they became a world empire, who was its leader? It's going to be Alexander the Great, because he took over the world in basically 3 years. And there was 3 significant battles. He just, everywhere he went, he just stormed through the countries and overtook them. Yes?
He only had about 50,000 men.
Well, yeah. Well, he was outnumbered sometimes, and he still, just because of, he was a military genius in many ways. Yes? Oh, I thought I heard something. Okay? He died suddenly on a mysterious illness. Now, a lot of people speculate what that illness was. In fact, I was reading a report by some people from Johns Hopkins. They were looking at all the recorded symptoms they had. And so they come up with their diagnosis of what he died of. Some maybe typhoid and other things. Some people say it was syphilis. We really don't know. But he died suddenly as age 35, okay? His parents wanted him to be well-trained, so Aristotle, he was his tutor. So he was trained by the best, because there was, a leading philosopher of his day, Aristotle, and he's the one that reared him. Here is his kingdom. Now notice here's Israel right down in here. And we've been following Daniel here in Babylon, because this was, much of the Babylon Empire. But he pretty much just took over all of it and pushed all the way over into India. And that's where he had some problems of resistance. But all the way down to Egypt. And this red line just shows his campaign of how he took it all. And again, 3 years. It's just crazy. And I guess this history says when he fought his last battle and overtook his last place, he sat down and cried because there was no other place to conquer. This guy loved war, didn't he? Okay? But he was the horn, the first king, but he dies suddenly, and what happens? All right. Now, here, the text says the broken horn and the four horns that arose in his place represent 4 kingdoms. Now, we're talking 200 years before this happens. How did Daniel dream a dream like this and know what's going to happen before it happened? Again, it speaks to the inspiration of the Bible, right? That God is the one that's giving him this dream. So we know historically that he died, and he didn't divide up his kingdom into 4. His 4 generals, they're the 4 of the top ones, there were other ones, they fought among themselves and they divided it up. It was a power grab. Isn't that what happens? All right? And so we have, and here you have a name of the kings, the Ptolemaic, the Antonoid, the Seleucids, and then here he has a 4th one. But the major ones, of course, are the Ptolemies to the south, including Israel and Egypt, and then the Seleucids up to the north. They were the largest ones. Who's in between those 2 warring factions? Israel. Israel is strategic in so many ways. 3 great religions come out of it. Judaism, Christianity, and later, and when I say great, I'm not speaking of the quality, but they're huge, aren't they? The Muslim faith. But Israel was in the pathway between all of Egypt and all of the north. And so you couldn't go through Arabia in the desert. If you want to get down to Egypt and conquer it, who did you have to go through? Israel. Israel was always attacked from the north. And then when Egypt would respond, they were always attacked from the south. And it was just like this waves of army and destruction washing over them back and forth. And that's what they have a history of, time and time after again. Now, were the kings in charge that were doing this? What do we learn from Daniel and Isaiah? God's causing these kingdoms to come against them. God's doing it, and often it's because of punishment for their own sins. Because he promised them, Israel, that if you were faithful to me, I'd protect you from your enemies, all right? But this is no different, what happened here. Now, one of the Seleucid kings is going to be a guy named Antiochus Epiphanes. Now, here we find that Seleucus was assassinated in 281. We're going to see this pattern because what happened to his father? He was assassinated. When we have Seleucus Philopator dying, Antiochus killed his own brother so he could take the throne himself. Would you want to be in a royal family? Would you want to be a king? You're always having to watch your back, aren't you? And because this is typical of all these kingdoms, that they're getting assassinated. Rome had the same problems because people are just power hungry and they're quite evil. Antiochus Epiphanes probably topped the cake in many ways. He was so evil. Like I say, history says perhaps he killed 100,000 Jews when he went down there because he would take bribes from the people that wanted to be priests. And when another high priest or person wanted to be high priest, he offered him more money. So the first guy was killed and the next guy took over. This was typical what was going on in Israel in this time. And you can read the history in other books outside of the Bible. But he comes through, and here Daniel in his vision is getting a prophecy of him. This latter period, when the transgressors have run the course, a king will arise, insolent and skilled and full of intrigue. So this guy's cunning, but he's evil. He's power hungry. By his power, he will be mighty, but not by his own power, and he will destroy to an extraordinary degree. So in other words, if you challenge him in any way, what would happen to you? This is like the mafia of that day, because if you cross the Godfather, what happens to you? You're dead. So how do you keep control? By killing off all your enemies. Anyone that would even raise their head up and suggest something, they're dead, because that's how you keep control and power, and that's what he did. So he will destroy to an extraordinary degree and prosper and perform his will. He will destroy mighty men and the holy people. Who would that be reference to? The Jews, excuse me. This is the interpretation given by Gabriel. And everyone throughout the religious world says this is Antiochus Epiphanes. And it doesn't happen until about 175 when he takes in power. And what year was this dream? Do you remember? 547. So do the math. 175. Someone do that. Brad, you're the mathematician.
You show your work and I'll tell you.
All right, it's 400 less 20. It's 380 years, 378 years, okay, later. And Daniel's dreaming what's going to happen 378 years later. And he's dreaming about how his own people are going to be just totally destroyed and murdered. And then he hears also how the holy temple is going to be desecrated with pig's blood. So see why he's so exhausted and sick for many days when it's all done? You've never dreamed or had a vision like this one. And of course, it's all true. That's what makes it worse. It's not just a dream like you and I have. This one's going to happen, all right? So in verse, here we got, I like this chart because here you have 4 horns coming out of this shaggy goat. Alexander Great is the first one, right? His horn gets broken off because he dies. And then 4 come out, and we have the Ptolemies, Cassander, the Seleucids, Lysimachus, is that his name? Then out of the Seleucids, the 6th guy is Antiochus Epiphanes, all right? He's going to come in the latter times. Josephus says this. You can't read it. Josephus was who? An historian for the Jewish people. He says, no prophecy was ever more accurately fulfilled than this. It's amazing. So it indeed, he says, it so came to pass that our nation suffered these things under Antiochus Epiphanes, according to Daniel's vision, and that he wrote years before they came to pass. So they all understood Daniel speaking of what would happen with this man. I want you to note this too. The Seleucid promoted Greek language and their culture throughout their domain. Now, this is somewhat interesting I think, okay? What language, this is not a trick question, did the Greeks speak? Greek. Oh, you guys are really good, okay? They spoke Greek. Now, for bonus points, what type of Greek did they speak? Who said it? Koine Greek. Now, how many knew that? In other words, you have different dialects and different kind of Greeks, right? I mean, a language like even German, there's different kind of, and then even French. Well, Koine Greek was the language they spoke, and it was pretty much the worldwide language of its day, just like English is today. If you want to do business worldwide, when I go to Africa this next week, you'll communicate in English. That's what you do. Well, in their day, it was Koine Greek. Now, why this is important, and I'm pointing out, it's what we call a dead language. Now, what is a dead language? What does that mean? No new interpretations, it hasn't changed. It's dead. What does that mean? It's not used anymore. It's dead. It's not spoken anymore. Now, why is that important? What were you going to say? This is Clinton's brother, by the way.
Testament will eventually be translated into that.
I'm sorry?
The Old Testament
All right.
will eventually be translated into that.
Okay, now what's good about this is language over time morphs into new meanings, okay? And so, can someone give me an example of an English word doesn't mean what it used to mean? Sick. I mean, that's sick, right? What does that mean when you say something's sick? That's good. All right? All right.
The word gay.
You're hip? Well, gay used to be a really good word, wasn't it? You know, it was a gay, happy life and all that. And it was, you see some of the old movies and they use the word gay a lot. Now it's a diminutive term speaking of a homosexual, all right, if you call someone gay. That'd be another example. But language is dynamic. It's changing all the time, isn't it? But when it dies, the meanings and the definitions are locked in. Okay? So they don't change anymore. They mean what they mean forever because no one uses it anymore. Okay? Now, why that's important is because we're talking now then when the Romans come and they overtake the Greeks, they adopt the Greek language. And when the New Testament is written, guess what it's written in? Koine Greek. Now, why is that important? A lot of people say, how do we know the Bible means today what it meant back then? Easy. The language is locked, all the definitions. You can go back and find out what every word meant in its day, and so you know exactly what Jesus intended to say when he spoke it. Isn't that fascinating? Now, who's behind that, you think? God our Father. Now, also, as you pointed out, the Old Testament is written in 2 languages. What is it? Hebrew, and what'd you say, David? Kevin, I mean? Aramaic, okay? In fact, we've seen Aramaic in chapters 2 through 7. Here in chapter 8, he goes back to Hebrew. Daniel does. Okay? But it's most largely written Hebrew, which reads backwards. It goes from right to left, and it's just, I don't even want to start to learn it. I would love to, but I'm too lazy at age 60 to try to learn Hebrew. Okay? But thankfully, we don't have to, because they took the Hebrew text and they translated it into Koine Greek, and it's called the LXX, or the Pentateuch, and it's the Hebrew Old Testament written in Greek. Huh? The Septuagint. Oh, not the Pentateuch. Thank you. Septuagint. Thank you. So when I said it, it didn't sound right, so I'm glad you guys are on me. Huh? Yeah, the 70, okay? So it's written in Koine Greek, so we know exactly what it meant as well. All right, so when you see the word Septuagint or LXX, that's the Old Testament translated into Greek, Koine Greek. That was all because of Alexander the Great, who started it, and also by the hands of this guy, Antiochus Epiphanes. And when the fullness of time came, Galatians 4:4, God sent forth his son, born of a woman. Fullness of time, what does that mean? Everything was perfectly ready. Everything. And I think it includes this. A world language that is ready for the gospel to go around the whole world, because everyone can speak this language. Yes?
Yeah, when the scripture says that at the proper time, Christ appeared, I don't have anything in there that says that that's what it was. Look at it.
Yeah.
Look at the evidence.
That's right. So many things. That's right. You know, we could talk. We could talk about some of the other things, like the Roman roads that people could travel on all around the world. There's so many things that were just perfect for Christ to come when he did. It wasn't a coincidence. Huh? I'm sorry?
Roman peace.
Yes, right. Yes, Clinton. Well, that's right. That's right. That's right. So that's a little lesson in the Bible and how it's written, and it started right here, okay? When they promoted the Greek language. And when we say Greek, think Koine Greek. It's a dead language. No one speaks it today. Okay? So like sometimes I'll give you a Greek word and I'll tell you how it's pronounced, but I don't know. We really don't know. We have guesses, but we just don't know. So here we go. Any questions about that? All right, so here this guy, because of his shrewdness, he will cause deceit to succeed by his influence. He will magnify himself in his heart. Doesn't that happen to a lot of leaders? They become egomaniacs. They want people to worship them. What did it say? Absolute power, what? Corrupts absolutely. Thank you. He will destroy many while they're at ease. In other words, you ever see movies? I was watching this World War II movie, The Battle of the Bulge, that a bunch of GIs surrendered to the Germans, and they didn't want to take them prisoner, have to deal with them in the winter, so they lined them all up and shot them. And that's one of the most despicable things happened. Of course, that word came out, and of course it just enrages and emboldens the rest of the Allied forces, right? That's what I imagine seeing here. When you're killing people at ease, it's murdering when they don't expect it. When you make agreements with them and then you murder them afterwards, you catch them off guard. It's always happened, but this guy was good at it. He will even oppose the Prince of Princes, but he will be broken without human agency. The vision of the evenings and morning, which has been told is true. Keep this vision a secret, for it pertains to many days in the future. Again, 378 years. So here we are where we started. Daniel, after he heard this, exhausted, sick for days. But I was astounded at the vision. There was none to explain it. When you say none to explain it, you say, didn't he just have the explanation? But what's missing in it? The details, maybe the why, okay? And okay, who is this horn? Well, it's another king. What's his name? What's he going to be doing? We look back and it's easy for us to see it, okay? But Daniel has probably lots of questions. And also there's no one to tell it to either, okay?
Daniel's also have the other visions of the Roman Empire coming and the mountain and, well, it wasn't Daniel's vision, but he interpreted the other visions of the kingdom that's coming and how does this connect to it?
Yes, that's right. Now, after the Greeks, who's going to come? We know the Romans, and we'll deal with that later. But here is Daniel's, the 8th chapter. And I went through it rapidly because I want you to see the complete picture. It's not hard for us, even though when you read it the first time, it looks terribly hard, doesn't it? I encourage you to Google Alexander the Great. There's a movie about Alexander the Great, more than one. Watch it on Netflix or read about it, and then Google Antiochus Epiphanes and read about him so you get a fuller picture of who this fellow was. And you see how he matches up perfectly with what Daniel's vision is. Yes?
I had a note that it says in verse 25 that he would be broken without human hand.
Yes.
And history tells us, at least what I had written down, was that he died of worms.
Uh-huh. I have that here.
Didn't mean to get ahead of you.
No, that's fine. I'm glad you did because I skipped it or I forgot to mention it. Yeah, the couple things. He assaulted Jerusalem. He was anti-Semitic, it says, to the core. He murdered over 40,000 Jews in 3 days. He sold an equal number to slavery. This is before he desecrated the temple. Yeah, his name, Epiphanes, means manifest or illustrious. Epiphanes, illustrious. The Jews mocked his name, calling him Antiochus Epiphanes, which means madman man. They just changed his word from epiphany to Epiphanes, which means madman. He was a madman. And that's what they called him, okay? Mark it down. We're done with 5 minutes to go. All right, any questions or comments? So next week is my favorite, next chapter is one of my favorite chapters in Daniel. It's Daniel's dream and his prayer of confession. And we find the angel comes down and answers the prayer. It's stunning to me. So read ahead, chapter 9 if you can. And we'll look at it when I get back in 3 weeks, okay? Anything else? Thank you.